What it do, family? Alright. Sorry for taking so long to get back with y'all, man. Just got a lot of shit going on right now. But today we want to get into part two of ancient Mayan knowledge. Really, we're gonna recap the first part, and then we're gonna read a couple more pages and just, you know what I mean, build on this knowledge. We're gonna continue on and continue on and continue on until we do this book, finish this book, and go on to the next one. But I want y'all to be able to get all the knowledge because it's some very, very, very heavy things that we're gonna talk about, right? And it encompasses everything, for real, for real. Now, as you know, I say, as above, so below, as within, so without, as the universe, so the soul, which to me means a variety of things, but it always comes back to balance at its root. The masculine and feminine together in harmony creates divinity, right? Astronomy and agriculture, body and soul, light and dark, blood and bone, left brain and right brain, right? From the macrocosm to the macrocosm. Let me say that again, from the microcosm to the macrocosm, right? Everything connects, like our cellular structures actually mirrors neutron stars in space. And these are the ancient knowledge that our ancestors practiced. And we're gonna get back in, we're gonna recap part one because YouTube always doing me, not YouTube, TikTok always doing me dirty. They banned me. I don't think I can go back live until tomorrow. They banned me for like a week. But I know they ain't gonna do nothing over here, so we're gonna get into that in just a second, man. I ain't on camera, my bad. All right, so with part one, we're recapping that, right? So there are, unlike a lot of people believe, right, there are not a numberless number of deities or gods pertaining to the Mayans and Aztecs, right? There are only different aspects of the true creators, right? Different representations of the supreme creators and rulers, right? And the ancient Mayans termed them invisible, incomprehensible, impalpable, and revered them as the father and mother of all, right? So it's not just one or the other. That's why I told you earlier, as above, so below, as within, so without, right? Which goes back to balance at its root to me, right? The masculine and feminine together in harmony creates divinity, right? So, but yeah, so they revered the supreme creators as the father and mother of all, right? Tezcatlipoca, right? We're gonna get into him. Well, y'all go back to part one. It's on my page. It's a long live, it's a couple hours long, but y'all can go back to that and refer to things that I'm talking about. But Tezcatlipoca, symbolic name, means shining mirror. And it was actually a obsidian mirror, right? Obsidian stone. It wasn't only used for the so-called shining mirror, which was used to do justice, like if they bring somebody up, it can do a number of things: predict the future, confirm justice, like be the last say so, but also used as weapons and other things, right? And representing stars, right? The obsidian. But Tezcatlipoca, whose name means shining mirror, is identical with Michelantecutli, right? The lord of the underworld, also the ruler or the regent of the north, since Mictlantecuhtli is the name of that cardinal point, right? Now, when it comes to a lot of these, when it comes to ancient Aztec, a lot of these names is in the wash, right? I'm going to be pronouncing them in the English way, you feel me? And y'all can go back and see the actual Nawash way. Now, the English way to say Nawaru or their language is Nawaru, right? But the correct is Nawash, right? It's how you gotta say different things, but I ain't about to get into all that right now. But yeah, so Michelantecutli and Tezcatlipoca are the same, basically identical, right? And they are, which represents, which we're gonna get into later, which represents the feminine, right? It represents agriculture. We're gonna get into all of that, right? But Michelin, but they call him ruler of the underworld, Tezcatlipoca, the lord of the region. I mean, the lord of the underworld, also the ruler of the region of the north. And pay attention to these cardinal points too, right? Since Mictlantecuhtli is the name of that cardinal point. Now, in the Codex Fuenlau, it shows an important myth showing how Tezcatlipoca, after being the sun, right, was cast down from that supreme position by Huitzilopochtli, right, and descended to the water, but had arisen again in the shape of an ocelot, right? Now, hold on. Now, y'all can see at the bottom, I know y'all used to this, that emblem of America with the sister right there, right? Now, what she has over her waist side going to her hip and everything, that is the ocelot, or most likely the ocelot. I'm not going to say it is for definite, but that ocelot, that picture, this emblem is pictured in California, right? The ocelot is indigenous to North Mexico and California. So, you know what I mean? Y'all can put two and two together. It's only a couple other indigenous cats with that type of coat, right? But that they chose the ocelot for a reason because of the spots in the coat, which means ek in Mayan, right? And that basically means it's basically with stars. They seen it as stars, but we're gonna get into all that too. But let me go back. So the supreme, so Tezcatlipoca, after him being the sun. Now remember, Tezcatlipoca and Huitzilopochtli, Huitzilopochtli represents the above, Tezcatlipoca represents the below, but they always rotating, always fighting for that supreme position, right? So they always switching places. When Tezcatlipoca fall, Huitzilopochtli rises, and vice versa, right? That's the sun and the moon. It encompasses a lot, right? He said, bro, do you think we live in a dream? All right, that's besides the point. But I appreciate everybody in this live. Share it out if you can. Tell a friend to come kick it with me right quick. Now, so we was just saying how Tezcatlipoca, after being the sun, was cast down from that supreme position by Huitzilopochtli and descended to the water that had arisen again in the shape of an ocelot and transformed himself into the constellation of Ursa Major. Because remember, all of this goes back to astronomy and agriculture. All of these ancient teachings and knowledge, it all goes back to balance, agriculture, astronomy, duality, that whole thing right there, right? Now, so now Tezcatlipoca had arisen again and arisen again in the shape of an ocelot and transformed himself into the constellation of Ursa Major. Now, the indigenous name for that star group is Silao Coloro, or Colos, right? Different ways to pronounce it. I'm gonna spell it out for you. It's Citlalcolotl, Colos, right? Or star scorpion. Colo means star scorpion, right? Or Silao means star and Coloro means scorpion, which is in reference to its tail when it's mad because it's enraged, right? And that the scorpion has a habit of recurving its tail when it's mad, and the Nahuatl verb for coloro means to bend or over or twist something, right? And coloro is spelled now when I'm doing this, showing you not only how this connects with astronomy and everything, but it actually connects with the language, right? So it's not only practices and things they're implementing, they actually implement it inside their language, right? Now it says Nahuatl verb, the Nahuatl verb koloa means to bend over or twist something. The adjective, now let me spell koloa for you. That is Coloa, and that means to bend over or twist something. The adjective kolotic is applied to something bent over or recurved, and that's spelled Coltic, right? And the noun Kolotili or Kolotis, or I'm not going to embarrass myself, but y'all get it. It is Colotli. All right. It is almost the identical with Koloto, which means the cross beams, the mounting branch or handle of a cross, right? Because the first depictions of a cross was implementing or mirroring what they seen up in the stars, right? Astronomy. So when you first seen a star depicted, drew on a cave, whatever, however they depicted the first cross, it was because of astronomy. Just like the swastika, just like so many other symbols that we see today, and we think it just means something religious, but it goes deeper, a lot deeper, right? Um, now I wrote this shit down for y'all, man. If you got something, put it in there. You hear me? Right? Now, those facts show the idea underlying the name for Ursa Major is something bent over or recurved, right? In the Maya language, there's a resemblance between the words for scorpion and for cross, because you remember me just telling you about how cross and the scorpion kind of relate just because of the bending of the arms and Ursa Major. Once y'all see Ursa Major and everything, y'all see what I'm talking about, right? Now, matter of fact, I probably can put this page. Let me see something. I probably can put this page on the screen. Oh, nah. Okay. No, I don't see it. I ain't gonna mess with it. But all right. All right. The fact shows that the idea underlying the name for Ursa Major is something bent over or recurved. In the Maya language, there is a resemblance between the words for scorpion and for a cross. In the Maya language, Zen Chi, spelled Zinche, means cross, and Zen N means scorpion, right? So you see the resemblance of Zen within those two words, which shows why the conception of a cross was connected with the idea of its arms being bent over or recurved, as in the ancient Mexican calendar swastika, right? Now, I'm not sure if I have it on the screen. No, I don't have it on the screen, but let me see something. Hold on. Okay, all right, it ain't right there, but we ain't gonna sweat that. But I just wanted to show y'all, right? But y'all can look it up yourself. Now, yeah, so just like it was been, so what I was saying is, in the Maya language, Zenchi means cross and Zen N means scorpion, which shows why the conception of a cross was connected with the idea of its arms being bent over or recurved, as in the ancient Mexican calendar swastika. The scorpion is one of the symbols for Michelantakutili, right? The Lord of the North, or the underworld. The verb koloa, besides, and I'm gonna spell that Coloa, besides the meaning to bend over or twist something, also meant the action of describing or performing a circle by walking around something, right? Which Tezcatlipoca, the Ursa Major, is represented as doing, since it is figured surrounded by a circle of footsteps. Tezcatlipoca is a god usually represented with one foot, because you remember, all right, I think I'm going to get to it, right? Because after he was descended to the water, he fought an alligator who bit off one of his foot and carried it away. So that's what happened with Tezcatlipoca. So now when you see him being figured with one foot, or you may see a tecbatao, that's what they call an alligator, like kind of like fastened into one of his feet, and it's a cross symbol that he's standing on, right? That's Polaris, Ursa Major, but all of that is enacting astronomy, right? Um, Now, let me go back to that. So it says Tezcatlipoca, the Ursa Major, is represented as diving as doing since it's figured surrounded by a circle of footsteps. Tezcatlipoca is a god usually represented with one foot because after he descended to the water, he fought with an alligator who bit off his foot and carried his weight and carried it away. So you will see him show his tibia. So sometimes you'll see him depicted with his tibia exposed, right? And for the ones when his tibia is not exposed, they have like a type of like a ornament, like a breast symbol, and it usually be blue by his ear, showing you that that's Tezcatlipoca, right? Um, but yeah, and like I told y'all earlier, the obsidian mirror is also another symbol along with the scorpion for Tezcatlipoca, right? Now, the footless god, that's what he's called, right, is shown with water, fire, and a serpent as a combination of symbols as well. He is also figured as standing on a cross-shaped symbol, Olin, right? Olin is spelled Ollin, right? The accepted meaning of four movements. So Olin means four movements, right? And Tezcatlipoca is usually depicted standing right in the center with his foot kind of fixated or permanently put there, right? Which represents Polaris and the four seasons, equinoxes and solstices, and you know what I mean? Yeah. And you accept the meaning of four movements. In that depiction, the jaws of Tecumseh, the symbol of the North, are holding one of Tezcatlipoca's foot in a tight grip, fastening him to the center of a diagonal cross, which meant he was permanently attached to one spot by one foot. His movement only could possibly be for him to make a circle by hobbling around one foot with the other, right? And that foot that's permanently fixated to the center will act as a pivot or an axis, right? So I hope y'all being able to follow along with me. Right, so this is just going back to astronomy, and what I'm showing you is how all of this, even these so-called deities, which are not deities, right, is just different representations of the supreme creator, right? They didn't believe in all these different gods. They only believe in the supreme creators, which was one, a man and a woman, right? Together comes together, makes divinity, right? Yeah, so he's also figured standing on a cross-shaped symbol, Olin, the accepted meaning of which is four movements. In that depiction, the jaws of Tecumseh, the symbol of the North, are holding one of Tezcatlipoca's foot in a tight grip, fastening him to the center of a diagonal cross, which meant he was permanently attached to that one spot by one foot. His only movement possible would be to make a circle by hobbling on one foot around the other, which acts as a pivot or axis. Michelan Tekutili, which is like Tezcatlipoca, the Lord of the North, is referred to as the lame devil. And the reason why he's referred to as the lame devil is because he only got one foot, right? Lame means handicap, right? Yeah. So the lame devil, which is one of the four principal gods of the ancient Mexicans. In the codex is recorded that these four gods were stars who had fallen from the heavens, right? So you see how that goes back to astronomy, right? Recorded that these gods were stars that fallen from the heavens. They said there are current stars in the firmament. Now they wrote this in the book. They wrote firmament in the book. So if you know, you know, right? We're going to get into that later. Now, it said the Nahuatl word for Ursa Major or Ursa Minor, right? Because it's an Ursa Major and it's an Ursa Minor, right? The Nahuatl word for Ursa Minor is Shono Kulili, figured as an S. So whenever you see on ancient Mexican symbols and you see an S as representing Shon Kulili or Ursa Minor, right? And it's also they also bake a S-shaped cake for a festival every year, right? In so-called honor of Sean Kulili, right, or Ursa Minor. Tezcatlipoca was connected to Ursa Major and Ursa Minor, right? The calendar stone of Mexico with the symbol of Olan in its center. There, they found the symbol was a figurative representation of the annual apparent movements of the sun and recorded its positions at the solstial and equinoctial periods, right? So the calendar stone of Mexico with the symbol Olan in its center, they found that the symbol was a figurative representation of the annual apparent movements of the sun and recorded it and its positions at the solstial and equinoctial periods. Olan was usually figured with an eye symbol for a star in its center. Right? I'm reading, so that's why I'm looking over there, yo. So that was heavy. Y'all always see that eye, y'all got different symbols around the world with the eye in the center, right? You got the, what to call it, the eagle hand, or a couple different symbols with that eye, right? But the ancient most representation of that eye with in the center just meant Polaris. It goes back to astronomy, right? Salute, Iyoko family. What do you do? Appreciate you for vibing with me. Everybody tap the screen, share the live. Yeah, we just going over this part one recap right quick, and then we're gonna read a couple pages. Part two. I ain't gonna hold y'all too long tonight, but we're gonna get into it. All right, so what I just said, they found that this symbol was a figurative representation of the annual apparent movements of the sun and recorded its positions at the celestial and equinoctial periods. Olan was usually figured with an eye, the symbol for a star in its center. Ancient Americans conceived the idea of two suns, right? Check this out. Now, it's a young day sun. So the sun that we see in a day that gives us our vitamin D, right? They say that's the young sun. That's the day sun, right? And then you have a more ancient sun, or the night sun, which they call the black sun, right? Now, the ancient Mexican name for sun is Tonatiuh. Tonatiuh is the ancient name for sun, right? Which merely means that which sheds light and could apply to stars too. So Tonatiuh means which sheds light, and it wasn't only applied to the sun, it was applied to stars too. Now in a picture, and wait, not only that, it was used to convey like powerful titles, right? Let me just read what I wrote. In picture writings, the image of the sun was meant to convey the word Dioro or Dios, right? Dios, how you really say it, but Dioro is the English way to say it, right? The Spaniards assumed it was equivalent to their Dios, also a referential title bestowed upon the chieftains and superiors, right? So Dioro, right, or Dios was a name given to the chiefs and anybody that was really ahead in power, everything, right? And it also can be used to signify something divine, supremely beautiful, etc. The Olan represented the movements of luminaries during the night and orb of day. There are four numerals in the symbol Olan resemble the four stars which form the body of the bear in the constellation of the Ursa Major. Because a lot of people don't know that it's four constellations was inside Ursa Major, right? And let me just read what I just said again, right? The Olan represented the movements of luminaries during night and orb of day. There are four numerals in the symbol Olin resemble those of four stars which form the body of the bear in the constellation of Ursa Major. And another name for Ursa Major is the Great Bear, right? But it's four stars. Now, all these numbers, we're gonna get into a lot of numbers, right? But all these numbers is important too. So all these is our ancient teachings. Numerology, astronomy, agriculture, all of this shit connects. All of this, right? Now, we're on like page 5 of the recap. Let me see. Now it said, ancient star observers would first consider the brightest stars and separate them from the dimmer ones. They discussed the stars that never set, which are the circumpolar stars, from the ones that did rise and set, right? So they separated them, right? They naturally in a northern clime choose out the constellation of the Great Bear or Orion, and for small groups of stars like the Pleiades too, right? Because if y'all know all of these stars, right? Astronomy, because you know all these mounds, pyramids, ancient energy temples or centers, right? Align with certain constellations, the stars. It all goes back to astronomy, right? And Pleiades was very important for us in North America, right? The Seven Sisters, y'all know about that, right? A few years of observation would have appeared to demonstrate the absolute changelessness of the places of rising and setting of the same stars. When studying stars for hundreds of years, the stars, it would appear to represent fixity, while movements of the sun, moon, and planets would seem to be bound by no law. All right, so that simply means until we knew better, some of our ancient ancestors believed that the stars didn't move, right? Because they move very, very slow. They move slow as fuck. You know what I mean? So they move, but in their lifetime, they wouldn't have been able to see them move, right? But they passed this knowledge down to their descendants, right? Which we will be able to tell that they move, right? Over time. But that was through time, ancient teachings, ancient passings of knowledge, right? Which we were big on, because knowledge is power, literally. That's what our ancestors practiced, right? We're going to get to that, right? But yeah, but they thought the moon and the sun was bound by no law because they seen them move every day. You know what I mean? That's basic, right? But the stars did move very, very slowly. Ursa Major, probably the first constellation, played an important role. Ursa Major was probably the first constellation that played an important role. The star group formed 4 equidistant positions corresponding to the numerals in the symbol Olin of the calendar stone of Mexico, right? The observation of Polaris and circumpolar constellations formed the swastika, because the swastika was ours, like I tell you. It wasn't nobody else's. Yeah, the Nazis and different wicked people took it, right, and perverted it and did all type of, you know what I mean, make it stand for fuck shit. But at its root, it was always ours, right? And it came from astronomy, right? It was so much ours that we made a calendar out of the swastika, right? Yeah, so the symbol Olin, the observation of Polaris and circumpolar constellations formed the swastika. There are striking resemblances between the composite image of Polaris, Ursa Major, and certain forms of swastika. Now I got the book right here, y'all, but I don't feel like turning my camera around and doing all that extra shit. But just believe what I'm saying. I'm only taking information from the book. You ain't gotta believe me. Go do the research. But you know what I'm saying. I ain't gonna cap in my rap. Right? But yeah, so now y'all see how the first swastika was formed, right? Yeah. The origin of the swastika came from astronomy, developed into their ingenious system of government and social organizations, right? That's another key point that our ancestors did, right? So we didn't only, because y'all, oh shit, I'm gonna put it on camera. We didn't only study the stars, right? But and implement it, and by doing implementing the knowledge on earth by mounds and everything else, right? We actually built our social organizations, our structures, our governments, and everything from the knowledge we got from astronomy. Like our city states was literally built in the formation of certain constellations, right? So that's very important. That's just showing how we seen how important this knowledge was to us, right? And you remember me telling you in the beginning that everything connects from the microcosm to the macrocosm, right? From things that we make connect to things that naturally connect. This shit gets deep and encompasses a lot, right? Um, all right, composite pictures of Ursa constellations constituted an exact record of their annual rotation and a perfect sign for the period of the year. So the calendar swastika, right, is simply representing a cycle of a year. So it represented the year, right? So this is what I'm saying. So composite, let me read that part again, right? As a matter of fact, let's go back. Let's go back. So it says the origin of the swastika came from astronomy, which developed into their ingenious system of government and social organizations. Composite pictures of Ursa constellations constituted an exact record of their annual rotation and a perfect sign for the period of the year. The association of rotary motion with the advance of time and its division into fixed periods or cycles would be the natural outcome of the recognition of the annual rotation of the star groups, right? The calendar swastika or cross, or the ancient cross of Mexico, shows absolute proof of the ingenious association of the cross symbol with the ideas of rotary motion and the progress of time, and ultimately a sign for a year or cycle. I guess I wrote that twice. Ursa Major and Ursa Minor are separate representations of the swastika and swastika, right? Now, let me go back up a little bit. Now, so when you see the ancient Mayan calendar swastika, right, it's going to be into four groups, right? Represents the four seasons, right? Not only that, represents the equinoxes and solstices, right? And then you're going to see two identical twin states, right, on each one, right? And they're that's Quetzalcoatl or Kukulkan, right? The supreme feathered serpent, right? Which represents duality, right? And then their heads are all meeting to meet Polaris right there in the middle. I can pull it up and show y'all. It's right here, but I got some shit on my desk. So I don't want on camera. But yeah, so that's important, right? That's a gem, right? And it shows how all of it comes back to astronomy. Now when it comes to the swastika and swastika, let me just read it out for you. So the swastika shows the bend to the right of the arms and Ursa Major, and the swastika, which is spelled SUAV, right? Not SWAT. You know how swastika is spelled, right? But it's spelled SUAVE. Swastika has a bend with his arms to the left, which represents Ursa Minor or Shalom Kulili, right? As we learned earlier, the bear constellations furnish the architect of different forms of swastika and cross symbols, right? So all of this is coming from the bear constellations, right? The Great Bear, the Little Bear, Ursa Major, Ursa Minor, right? Now, the swastika as a symbol wasn't made until after Ursa Major became circumpolar around 4000 BC, basically meaning it was first used in the Americas. Ancient Americans astronomers recognized the apparent immobility of the Polaris star and compared it to varying notions of all other celestial bodies and with the rotation of the circumpolar star groups. I'm gonna read that part again. Um, so it says ancient American astronomers recognized the apparent immobility of Polaris, right? Of the Polaris star and compared it to the varying motions of all other celestial bodies and with the rotation of the circumpolar star groups. This recognition, this of the rec, oh wait, this recognition of this made them use Polaris as a means of knowing direction, right? Because you follow direction, Polaris, you always gonna be able to find your way, right? They use this, it was so important. They use it for hunting trips at night, so they wouldn't get lost, so they wouldn't go into, areas that they were unwelcome, right? Whether it's by other tribes or by animals, right? Um, well, the ones that they wasn't trying to hunt, right? Um, Polaris became valuable to them because they could depend on it and trusted it to lead them on hunting expeditions at night safely by knowing direction. And American Indian rulers said this to de-establish the so-called sun cult, right? Because at first, the most ancient people, they kind of like worship the sun or seen the sun as the most valuable star or celestial body, right? If you got it, put it in the air. You heard me? Um, yeah, so he said this to get them to de-establish that, right? He said, it's not possible that the sun should be God who created all things, for if so, he would sometimes rest and light up the world, light up the whole world from one spot. Thus, it cannot be otherwise, but there is someone who directs him, and is the true creator. At the same time, with the recognition of Polaris as an immutable center of axial energies, the rotary movement of Ursa Major was important, right? So he basically said this ancient American ruler who de-established the sun cult and got people to start seeing Polaris as one of the major figures, right? Or the major figure, um, said, hey, it don't light up the whole world from one spot. It can't be, and, right? And a whole bunch more shit. Well, let's move on to the next part, right? Because this next part is important. It is not possible that the sun should be God who created all things, for if so, he would sometimes rest and light up the world from one spot. Thus, it cannot be otherwise, but there is someone who directs him and is the true creator. At the same time, with the recognition of Polaris as an immutable center of axial energies, right, the rotary movement of Ursa Major was important. Certain positions of Ursa Major and Cassiopeia, another constellation, after dusk, connected to two annual recurrence, right, of rain, vegetation, and verdure and bountiful food supplies. Members of the tribes who were more observant, now this part right here, right? Members of the tribe who were more observant learned to associate positions of certain constellations with the seasons. That helped decide when to travel, far, hunt, or plant certain fruits, crops that made them the leaders, right? So this knowledge of them studying the astronomy, the stars, right? And knowing and peeping all this shit, knowing when to do what and where to do it, that made them the leaders, right? So that's just showing you that knowledge is power, right? Face oil in a bitch. But yeah, so that's a gem right there. So, but where I was at. Boom, boom, boom. Right. All right. So they would keep learning more, but they only pass the knowledge down to their own families to keep the power within their descendants, within their line. Right. So this was the first form of esoteric teachings, right? In a way, because esoteric just simply means only for a select few, only for the initiated, right, of this type of knowledge, right? And they kept it away from the majority because they wanted their people to keep in power. And I'm not saying it's the right thing or a wrong thing, but we know what people do with the wrong information. When some people get the wrong information, it ain't no good, right? Um, but yeah, so they will keep the knowledge and pass it down to their family to keep the power so their descendants can build upon it, right? Remember me telling you earlier about that more ancient ones thought the stars didn't move, but as they continue to pass the information on or the knowledge down, they it showed that they did, right? Excuse me. Um, Yeah, so keep the policy nine. So this would be considered esoteric teachings, which only means the knowledge for a select few or initiated. Ursa Major and Cassiopeia were equals. Now peep this, but always held opposite positions. In ancient Mexico, Ursa Major was associated with an ocelot, which is represented as fighting an eagle, right? Ancient Mexican war chiefs were classed into two equally honorable grades, ocelots and eagles, right? The constellation of Cassiopeia resembles a bird with its wings spread face towards Polaris. When Cassiopeia is above Ursa Major, or when Cassiopeia is above, Ursa Major is below, and vice versa. You remember I told you they always fighting for the supreme position, no matter if it was a low Pochitili, which is only representations or kind of, how they talk about the stars. Let me just say that, right? But when Cassiopeia was above, Ursa Major was below, and vice versa, right? That's why they always seem to be in an eternal battle. They represented powers of the sky and the earth, light and darkness, and other opposites. In the mythology of Tezcatlipoca, the obsolete adversary is Huitzilopochtli, who is also represented as a hummingbird, right? The reason why the bird was associated with Huitzilopochtli, that this bird died or rather fell asleep in the month of October and remained attached by its feet to a twig. It is awaking again in April when the flowers blossom. When the flowers blossom, you hear me? Right. So let me read that part again, right? So it said the hummingbird was also a symbol of Huitzilopochtli. Now I said this bird died or rather fell asleep in the month of October and remained attached by its feet to a twig. It is awakened again in April when the flowers blossom. That's why the hummingbird is named Wazalo Wizazillin. Probably pronounced it as wrong, but that simply means the resuscitated, right? And it's connected. You can see Twizzalopochtli name is the name of the damn hummingbird, right? Now, that's why in the myth, the ocelot, which represents Tezcatlipoca, was cast down by Huitzilopochtli, the bird god, and rose again, and they repeated the cycle, right? Which all goes back to astronomy, right? Then the serpent, which was associated with the idea of time, so much so that it was made in a calendar wheel that we was just talking about earlier, right? Quetzalcoatl, Kukulkan, the serpent. Yeah, we're gonna get into that once we start reading. Once we're done with this recap, right? Yeah. So it said Now, the serpent, which was associated with the idea of time, so much so that it was made of the calendar wheel. Four loops form of its body mark and the four divisions of the year, right? So basically, when you see the calendar wheel, different kinds, right? But this one they specifically talking about is a big ass snake going in a circle, right? And each division of the year, it will be a circle there or loop in its body representing that division of the year, right? Um, now where we at? Now, division. So that made the calendar wheel four loops formed of his body, the four divisions of the year, twin serpents whose head and tails almost meet, sculptured around the famous calendar stone of Mexico, four serpents whose bent bodies form a large swastika whose heads are directed towards a central figure, which we talked about earlier, which is Polaris. Cassiopeia, who is Ursa Minor, was shaped as an S, right? Or Shalom Kalili, Sean Kalili, that's how you say it, right? Sean Kalili, right, is represented as an S. So when you see an S in these ancient codices or even on the murals, you'll know that represents Ursa Minor, right? Let's continue. We almost done. This the last little bit. We're about to get into this book. All right. Now, there are sacred numbers of ancient Mayans and Mexicans, and they are in the circumpolar constellations and in simple combinations of the same, like 7 for the amount of stars in Ursa Major and Minor, right? So there's 7 stars in that constellation of Ursa Major and Minor. Now, pay attention to these numbers, right? There are 5 stars of Cassiopeia, and Cassiopeia with Polaris and Ursa Major combined makes 13, which is important because the entire calendar system of Mexico and ancient Yucatan is based on the combination of the numbers 13 plus 7, which equals 20, and the other is 4 times 5, which equals 20. At the same time, you get 13 stars when you combine Ursa Minor and Major with Polaris. All right, then you get 5. 5 is with Cassiopeia, right? So it's 5 stars in Cassiopeia, and there are 4 constellations that make up Ursa Major, right? The combination of Ursa Minor and Cassiopeia equals 12 and a whole lot more. We're about to continue to part 2. All right, so we're done with that recap. How long that took? Damn near an hour. Shit. All right. What we on? So we're gonna start on page 29. Now this is the book. Let me let y'all know what we're reading from, right? Go back to that in a second. So we're reading from Archaeological and Ethnological Papers of the Peabody Museum, Harvard University, Volume 2, The Fundamental Principles of Old and New World Civilizations, a comparative research based on a study of the ancient Mexican religions, sociological, and calendar systems, right? And it's by Zila Nuttall, or Zelita Nuttall, I don't know how you say her name, but yeah. So we on page 29 right now, y'all. Boom, boom. Y'all can go make sure y'all go do all the research to be able to you know what I mean, see what I'm talking about. Don't just believe me, do the research for yourself. Let me light this up before we start. What it do, family? I don't know who all in here right quick. All right, we about to start in a second. Let me just get a couple pulls off of this shit, drink some water, and get it cracking. Tripping. What it do, man? I was, TikTok be fucking with me. Cause I'm supposed to be playing music this whole time. But I was live the other day just doing this. Just did a recap. I was about to get on some natives' ass, but they took my shit. And they ain't gonna run over here. Now that we could really talk to them how we want to talk to them, you feel me? Tell you about yourself, man. All right. Now it says, and we starting on page 29 at the part where it says, let me put this on the big screen. It says, before referring to the Mexican and Mayan representations, let me turn this shit down a little bit. It's that Miles Davis if you ain't knowing. All right. Oh yeah, page 29. This ain't the page. All right. So it says, before referring to the Mexican and Maya representations of the star group, I would next demonstrate that the sacred numbers of Mexico and of other countries situated in the northern hemisphere coincide exactly with the number of stars in the circumpolar constellations themselves, and in simple combinations of the same, right? So I just read that part to you, right? Ursa Major and Ursa Minor each contain 7 stars, and the number 7 is the most widely spread sacred number. Ancient traditions record that the race inhabiting Mexico consisted of 7 tribes who traced their separate origins to 7 caves situated in the north. In memory of these, at the time of the conquest, there were 7 places of sacrifice in the city of Mexico, right? So you see how they encompassing these numbers that they're getting from the stars, from astronomy, right? I shall recur to the number 7 further on in discussing the native social organization, and now direct attention to 5 stars of Cassiopeia and to the fact that the combination of the stars in this constellation with Polaris and Ursa Major yields the number 13. This result is especially interesting since the entire calendar system of Mexico and Yucatan is based on the combinations of the numerals 13 plus 7, which equals 20, and the latter again 4 times 5, right? Now, on the other hand, the same number 13 is also obtained by the combination of the Ursa star groups with Polaris, right? So Ursa Minor and Major combined with Polaris makes 13. The number 5 is constantly yielded by Cassiopeia, and the 4-fold repetitions of the groups supply the suggestion of the number 4. The combination of Ursa Minor and Cassiopeia yields 12, right? The accompanying figure exhibits swastikas composed of Ursa Minor accompanied by Ursa Major and Cassiopeia separated and combined. I next direct attention to the peculiar difference in the numerical values of the Ursa swastikas, right? Because remember I told you it's the swastika and swastika, right? I next direct attention to the peculiar difference in the numerical values of the Ursa swastikas. In the first, the central star surrounded by 4 repetitions of the. This music kind of fucking with me, God. Hold on. Let me turn it down. So, I ain't gonna hold y'all. Man, you mute that bit. I ain't trying to over talk it. All right. So where we was. All right. So it says the central star surrounded by 4 repetitions of the 7-star constellation yielded a total of 29 stars. 4 times 5 plus 9. Further combinations will be seen by a glance at the Ursa Major swastika. The analysis of Ursa Minor swastika is not so simple and occasions a certain perplexity, right? Drink some of this water. When I had first combined the four positions of this constellation, I had naturally and without further thought figured Polaris, but once as the fixed center, whereas I had repeated other stars of the compact group four times. It was not until I began to count the stars in the swastika that I had realized how I had unconsciously made one central star stand for four, and thus deprive the composite group of numerical value of three stars, right? On the other hand, if I repeated the entire constellation four times, I obtained a swastika with four repetitions of Polaris in the middle. In this way, however, Polaris became displaced and the idea of a fixed center was entirely lost. A third possible method of composing the swastika was to allow one central star for each cross-on, but this gave two central stars, each of which would represent two stars, unless enclosed in a circle and considered as a central group by themselves. The four and the two repetitions of Polaris could not convey the idea of a pivot or a fixed center. The three respective numerical values obtained from these experimental combinations were 4 times 6 plus 1 equals 25, 4 times 7 equals 28, and finally 2 times 13, or 4 times 6 plus 2 equals 26. Right? And each swastika, the central star forcibly stood for and represented 2 and 4. Let me say that again, right? Because this all is important. In each swastika, the central star forcibly stood for and represented 2 or 4. In the triskelions, the same perplexity arose. If Polaris was repeated, the idea of a fixed center was lost. It figured singly, it nevertheless necessarily and inevitably stood as an embodiment of three stars. Reasoning from my own experience, I could not but perceive in the foregoing facts a fruitful and constant source of mental suggestions that the natural outcome of which would be the association of the central star enhanced would be an enhanced numerical value and with a familiarity with the idea of one star being the embodiment of 2, 3, or 4, right? So it said the natural outcome of which will be the association of the central star with an enhanced numerical value and a familiarity with the idea of one star being the embodiment of 2, 3, or 4. As the evolution of religious thought and symbolism progressed, the idea would obviously lead to the conception of a single being uniting several natures in his person. In this connection, it is certainly extremely interesting to find the serpent associated with the calendar in Mexico and Yucatan, and its Nuash name being synonymous with twin, i.e., two, and Maya for serpent, can or cam being synonymous for the number 4. So you're seeing how all this shit connect, right? The serpent was therefore in both countries the most suggestive and appropriate symbol which could possibly have been employed in pictography to convey the idea of dual or quadruple natures embodied in a single figure. Added to this circumstance that to the native mind, the serpent would merely shedding his skin lived again, and we can understand why ancient Mexicans not only employed it as a symbol of eternal renewal or continuation of time of life, but it also combined with the idea of fecundity, fecundity, fecundity and reproductiveness. And fecundity, I know it means reproductiveness, so they just said that shit kind of twice. But I want to go back right quick because they had something in small print. We're gonna touch on that and then come back. All right, so the small print, it says, now besides the word coloro or kolos equals twin, The Mexicans had another term to express something double in pairs. A plant with two shoots was named Xolotl. Double agave plants or maize, when occasionally met with, were regarded with superstitious and the name Michelotl. All right. So now Colotl is spelled Coatl. Colotl. All right, that's how you really say it, but probably still saying it kind of fucked up, but you get my drift, right? So besides the word colotto equals twin, the Mexicans had another term to express something double in pairs. A plant with two shoots were named xolotl. Double agave or maize, when occasionally met with, were regarded with superstition and named michelotl. The pretty little parakeets, popularly known as lovebirds from their habit of constant association in pairs, were named xolotl, right? The circumstance that the term for the bird's down was also xolotl may explain why the down feathers of eagles and other birds were employed and played a certain role in ritual observances. They expressed and conveyed the sound of a word which meant something double and could therefore be used to symbolize a variety of meaning relating to multiplication of or propagation. The Mexicans figuratively connected birds down with the generation is proved by the well-known myth by the birth of Huitzilopochtli from the union of a ball of birds down and a goddess named she with the petticoat of serpents, right? Tufts of birds down figured on the shield in the female ancestors of the human race. Once the numerous title Tochi, which equals our grandmother, to express which figure of Sitili or hair was sometimes employed in pictography of. So they saying right there, of course, like in other religions, the hair was associated with reproductiveness, right? Tochi, which would be the female ancestress of the human race, they believe, right? Or our grandmother, to express which a figure of Sitili or hair was sometimes employed in pictography. Of it was said that she bore only twins. So Tochi bore only twins, a figure of speech meaning great productiveness, just as a female divinity is also termed the woman with 400 breasts. It's a lot of titties. In the text, the Tellerano Reminiscence Codex, we find Xolotl. I keep saying Xolotl. I ain't never spelled it out for you. It's it's XOLLOTL or Xolotl. Let me try to say it. Xolotl. I'm not gonna try to say it. In the text, we find Xolotl or Xolotl, some shit like that, a deity wearing the symbol of Quetzalcoatl or Quetzalcoatl, directly named the god of twins. So that's how, you know what I mean? Twins or two or four could also be, interpreted with ancient mythology, right? Now we're going to go back to where it says in Yucatan, where the Maya for serpent, can, spelled C-A-N, is almost synonymous with Kan, which is spelled C-A-A-N, which equals sky or heaven. And the adjective Kanlil equals celestial, divine. The idea of a divine or celestial serpent would naturally suggest itself, right? So Kanlil, which is an adjective, is spelled C-A-A-N-L-I-L, equals celestial, divine. The idea of a divine or celestial serpent, which would naturally suggest itself. It is therefore not surprising to find both countries with the name of serpent bestowed as a title upon a supreme celestial embodiment of the forces of nature, and its image employed to express this disassociation in objective form. In Yucatan, one of the surnames Isamina, a supreme divinity, was Kanlil, a name clearly related to Kanlil. So Kanlil, a name clearly related to Kanlil, equals divine, and Kan equals serpent. So in my language, that the people don't know, Kan equals serpent, right? So Can in ancient Mayan language uh, equals serpent. In Mexico, the duality and generative force implied by the word coloro or colos, something like that, colos. You got to make it's T and the L is one sound. It's supposed to be one sound, right? Colos, some shit like that, right? Or coloro. I'm gonna just say it like that, or coloro, right? In the ancient in Mexico, the duality and generative force implied by the word color are clearly recognizable in the native invocations addressed to our Lord Quetzalcoatl, the creator and maker or farmer who dwells in the heavens and is the Lord of the earth, which is Talal Tecutili. I'm not saying it in the wild way, right? Who is our celestial father and mother, great Lord and great lady. Title is Ome Tekutili. Literally, two Lord equals twin lady. Let me read that part again. Oh shit. Like, so it say in Mexico, the duality and generative force implied by the word color, right, spelled Coatl, are clearly recognizable in the native invocations addressed to our Lord Quetzalcoatl, the creator and maker or former who dwells in the heavens and is the Lord of the earth. Talau Tekutili, who is our celestial father and mother, right? Because you see how they always say father and mother. They don't say one or the other, right? That's why I don't get into these uh, gender wars and all that goofy ass shit. I love my women. I don't know what's wrong with y'all. I know real women that love us. All that shit's goofy for the internet, but never mind that. Who is our celestial father and mother. All right, so Talal Tekutili, who is our celestial father and mother, great Lord and great lady, right? Celestial father and mother, great Lord and great lady, whose title is Ome Tekutili, literally, or Teku, saying it wrong. I'm gonna spell it out for you. OME TECUHTLI literally means two Lord, which equals twin Lord, and Ome Chuado literally means two lady or twin lady, right? Now, the following data will suffice to render it quite clear that the Mexicans and Mayans employed the serpents as an expressive symbol, merely signifying the generative force of the creator to whom alone they rendered homage. It is no less an authority than Friar Bartholomew de las Casas, who maintained that in many parts of the American continent, the natives had particular knowledge of the true God. They believed that he created the universe and was its Lord and governed it. And it was to him they addressed their sacrifices, their cult, and homage in their necessities. All right, so I'm gonna read that part again, just so y'all see how these crackers do, right? You see how they do, right? And now, just a while ago, I just showed you how it's always two, twin lady, which goes back to as above, so below, right? That masculine and the feminine coming together in harmony creates divinity. It's always needed for both, right? But they come in and try to make it just all about the man, like on some funny style shit. Hold on right quick. Let me sorry, mute this. All right. Yeah. So yeah, you see how that's connecting, right? Now I'm going to show you. We're going to read that part again, right? Now, the following data will suffice to render it quite clear that the Mexicans and Mayans employed the serpent as an expressive symbol, merely signifying the generative force of the Creator to whom alone they rendered homage. It was no less an authority than Friar Bartholomew de las Casas, who maintained that in many parts of the American continent, the natives had a particular knowledge of the true God. They believed that He created the universe and was its Lord and governed it, and it was to Him they addressed their sacrifices, their cult, and homage in their necessities, right? Because that's some European way of thinking. We always did both. We ain't never just we for the men chief that was in rulership, they council was the elderly women, was the mothers, was the grandmothers, was the sisters in the tribe a lot of the times, right? So we ain't never, it was never just, I mean, all right, so now it says Friar Bartholomew specially adds that this was the case in Mexico according to the authority of Spanish missionaries, and no one can doubt that this was the case when they had when they read that in native invocations preserved by Sawagan, the supreme divinity is described as invisible and intangible, like the air, like the darkness of night, or the Lord who is always present in all places, right? Who is as impenetrable as an abyss, who is named for the wind, air, or breath, and the night. All things obey him. The order of the universe depends upon his will. He is the creator, sustainer, the omnipotent, and omniscient, omnipotent and omniscient. I'm pronouncing that wrong. Forgive me, y'all. He is termed the father and mother of all, the great God and great goddess, right? He is termed as the father and mother of all, the great God and the great goddess, our Lord and protector, who is most powerful and most humane, our Lord, in whose power it is to bestow all content, sweetness, happiness, wealth, and prosperity, because thou alone art the Lord of all things. One prayer concludes thus. So that was a prayer that I just read, right? From, no, it wasn't a prayer. It was just, yeah, it was. Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was. For what Friar Bartholomew was saying, right? Now, that's also what he put in his book, right? He said, one prayer concludes thus: live and reign forever in all peace and repose, though who art Lord, our shelter, our comfort, who art most kind, most bountiful, invisible, and impalpable. Right, impalpable. My bad. Yeah, so that's they saying that was ancient Native American or ancient American Indian prayers, right? Yeah, it is related that in gratitude for the birth of his son, the ruler of Texcoco, the Nuwalcolo erected the temple of the unknown God. It consisted of 9 stories to symbolize the 9 heavens, right? So you remember me telling you how they built different architecture and earthworks and different things based off astronomy, right? That's one example. It consisted of 9 stories to symbolize the 9 heavens. The exterior of the 10th, which formed the top of the 9 other stories, was painted black with stars. Its interior was encrusted with gold, precious stones, and feathers, and held the said God, who was unknown, unseen, shapeless, and formless. Right? So this was in the temple, right? A passage in Sawagan states that the invisible and imageless god of the Chichimex was named Yololi Ikalas, Ikalas, literally night, air, or wind. I butchered that, I know I did, which means the invisible and palpable God, by whose virtue all live, who directs by merely exerting his wisdom and will, right? Right? So this is just different ancient American Indian prayers showing that they didn't give us no God. We already had it. We understood it before who were the supreme creators before they did, right? They didn't. They when they came over here talking about so-called Christianizing us, that was just for the money, for the land, for the you know what I mean, for the resources. And they used that as an excuse to conquer an uncivilized people, right? But that can't be true. We'll get back to that too. Um, Now, the remarkable title of the Will of the Winds was Yao Yao. Hold on, let me try to do this. Yahuwah Lili Hikalis. Yahuwah Yahuwah. The first part of it is Yahuwah, right? It's Yahua, and it's Lilihecatl. So you see, I'm trying to pronounce right. Yahuwah Lili Akal. I probably fucked it up, but Yahuwah stands out, right? It is recorded as another name for Quetzalcoatl. This is undeniably proves that the Mexicans not only figured the deity by the image of the serpent, but also thought of him as the will, which obviously symbolized central force, rotation, lordship over the four quarters, i.e., universal rulership, right? So let me read that part again. The remarkable title of the Will of Winds was Yaul. Not doing that part again, is recorded as another name for Quetzalcoatl. This undeniably proves that the Mexicans, the ancient Mexicans, not these mestizos, not only figured the deity by the image of a serpent, but also thought of him as a will, which obviously symbolized the central force, rotation, lordship over the four quarters, i.e., universal rulership. Returning from these ideas of latter development to the primitive source of their suggestion, let us now examine the native picture of Sean Kalili, which is Ursa Minor, preserved in unpublished academia. They naming the book right now. Hold on. Excuse me. All right. It is an exact representation. All right, let me go back to that. Returning from these ideas of the later development to the primitive source of their suggestion, let us now examine a native picture of Shonkalili, Ursa Major, preserved in an unpublished academia in mess of Salgan's Historia in Madrid, right? So this shit is in Spain. It is an exact representation of the star group. The fact that the seven stars are figured of the same size in an accurate relation to each other either proves that the eyesight of the native astronomers were extremely keen and their atmosphere remarkably clear, or that possibly the minor stars of the group were more brilliant in ancient times than they are now, which is a lot more positive, which is, feasible, you know what I mean? Because we got all this pollution and shit in the air with, these cars and shit. Now, astronomers tell us, for instance, that as late as the 17th century, the star body, as late of the 17th century, the star in the body of Ursa Major nearest the tail was the brightest as the others, while it is now the fourth of the fourth magnitude only. So it's the fourth brightest star. But in the 17th century, I guess it was the brightest. And now this book, the 17th century will be the 1600s, right? Now, this book was written in the late 1800s, the late 1800s, right? So that's not a lot of time. It must be admitted that the shape of the constellation resembles an S. An SS sign is figured. Remember, an S means Shon right, or Ursa Minor. An SS sign is mentioned by Sawagan as occurring frequently as a symbolic design on native textile fabrics. It figures as such in the black garments of the female consort. Remember I told y'all, right? The female consort of Michelantecuhtli, right, in the Vienna Codex. And 33, he denounces it and as a suspect and hints that it was intimately connected with the ancient religion, right? So Sawagan denounced it, but that don't mean shit. It don't mean that he was right. S-shaped sacred cakes called Shonkilili were made during the feast of Maculis. I'm fucking it up. I'll spell it out for you. It's Macuilxitle, which equals 5 flowers, and are figured in the BNMS with a 4-cornered cross-shaped cake of a peculiar form, which is found associated with 5 dots or circles in the codices, and is also with the Tekbatal symbol of the north. Right. Now a recurved staff, which is held in the hand of a deity in the BNMS, is designed in the text of Shonquitl amongst the insignia of the gods sent by the presence of Montezuma to Cortez. Right? So you see this circle. All right. We're going to get to it, cuz. All right. A recurved staff, which is held, because I don't want to give up too much right now, right? A recurved staff, which is held in the hand of a deity in the BNMS, is designated in the text as Shonquitl amongst the insignia of the gods sent as presents by Montezuma to Cortez. So Montezuma trying to befriend Cortez, mark ass, upon him landing at Veracruz, which were 3 recurved scepters. Y'all remember me? If y'all haven't, go check out my video I made about ancient scepters that was found in Peru, right? Golden scepters, because that is make it more significant, right? But I show you what scepters really mean and what is incorporated. I'm not sure what they about to say right now, even though I read this book already. I don't remember every single part, right? But scepters represented agriculture, just point blank. Yeah, it represented agriculture, right? But yeah, so right here it says, by Montezuma to Cortez upon landing at Veracruz at 3 such recurved scepters, the descriptions of which I have collated and translated in my paper at Atlau or Spirit on the Atlau, oh yeah, I'm gonna spell it out for you. ATLATL, or spirit thrower of the ancient Mexicans. So ancient Mexicans had spirit throwers. Don't these mestizos, one of their little African jokes is that we were spirit throwers and shit, but didn't Columbus, when he encountered the Arawak or the Caribs in, I believe, I forgot which island, I think it's Haiti, but I'm not sure. It could be one of them other islands, whatever. But when he encountered them, right, he said that they had golden tip spears. But right here is showing you that the ancient Mexicans had already had that shit. Shit ain't adding up, huh? Now, in this work, I presented my reasons for concluding that the recurved scepters were ceremonial forms of the Atala. I'm just pronouncing it like that. I now perceive that they were endowed with a deeper significance and meaning. The Nawat text of Salgan Laurentian MS of Historia de la Conquista records the name of one of these staffs. They always got these names. Hetka Shonkulili. Hetka Shonkulili, literally the name, the curved or bent over air or wind. So the name of one of these staffs records the name of one of these staffs were Hetka Shonkulili, literally the curved or bent over air or wind, and describes it as made of bent or curved wood inlaid with stars formed of white jade, which equals Shalal Chu. I'm not even gonna pronounce it. I spell it out for you. Chalchihute. This passage authorizes the conclusion that four representations in the BNMS of the black recurved scepters exhibiting a series of white dots, also Heka Shonquiddle, inlaid with stars, and that all of these are none other but conventional representations of the constellation Shonkulili, the Ursa Minor. In each case, the deity carrying the star image also displays the Ekakozoro, the jewel of the wind, the unknown symbol of the wind god. But remember me telling y'all that these are not just these are just different representations of the supreme creator, right? In one of these pictures, he not only bears in his hand the star image, but also exhibits a star group on his head dress, consisting of a central star on a dark ground surrounded by a blue ring. Attached to this, a dark ground, 6 other stars are depicted, making 7 in all, right? Now, remember, I told you how important the number 7 is, right? But people, what I'm saying, in connection with this star group, it is interesting to note that the hieroglyph designating by Friar Diego de Landa as the character with which the Mayans began their count of days or calendar named Hun Itmix furnishes a case of an identical though inverted group, right, of stars. So and they actually depicting it right here on the screen. Enclosing a black ring, the glyph displays above a large black dot with 6 smaller ones grouped in a semicircle about it, and below 4 perpendicular bars. Subject to correction, I am inclined to interpret this glyph as a heretic sign for the constellation Ursa Minor and its 4 movements, to consider it as a furnishing and valuable proof of the origin of the Maya calendar. This seemingly inappropriate procedure of figuring shiny stars by black dots actually furnishes the strongest proof that the star group, which thus represented for in the Maya language, Ek, is hominid for the star, and black and a black spot was in consequence the most expressive sign for a star. So you remember me telling you about Shorty right here. I know y'all seen this emblem of America, right? And I told you that the oscillate, which we talked about within this past hour and a half, right, was important. It's actually indigenous to North Mexico and California, right? But she has that around her waist, and that represented astronomy, right? But it shows you that the indigenous people did what they were supposed to. It showed you who was really still practicing this and why they was practicing it, right? Let me read this part again because that shit was important. Now, she started off by saying, Yeah, I'm gonna read up a little bit. Um, it says, in connection with this star group, it is interesting to note that the hieroglyph designated by Fra Diego de Landa as the character with which the Mayans began their count of days or calendar named Hun, right? I told y'all about that. Hun MX furnishes a case of identical, though inverted group, right? Now this, pay attention to this part. Enclosed in a black ring, the glyph displays above a large black dot with six smaller ones grouped in a semicircle about it, and below four perpendicular bars. Subject to correction, she said, I am inclined to interpret this glyph as a heretic sign for the constellation of Ursa Minor and its four movements, and to consider it as a furnishing valuable proof of the origin of the Maya calendar. The seemingly inappropriate procedure of figuring shiny stars by black dots actually furnishes the strongest proof that a star group is thus represented. For in the Maya language, Ek is a homonym for star and black, and a black spot was in consequence the most expressive sign for a star. This fact affords a valuable explanation of the reason why the ocelot, whose skin is spotted with black, was employed as a figure of the nocturnal sky, and clearly proves that the ancient Mexicans adopted this symbol and its meaning from the Mayas, right? Because you remember I told you that a lot of this ancient Mexicans and shit, they got their knowledge from the Mayans, right? They took a lot of their shit. Actually, we gonna get to them telling you that, right? But in the Maya language, Ek means star, or is a homonym for a star and black, right? So in the ocelot, which is figured on this beautiful sister right here as the emblem of America, you feel me? It's representing this nocturnal sky and clearly proves that that the ancient Mexicans got their knowledge from the ancient Mayans, right? But the black sign, the black spots on that fur, on that coat, represent stars, right? For the ancient Mayans, right? And Ek is a homonym for a star and for black, right? And in consequence, a black spot was the most expressive sign for a star. Now we will revert to the S-shaped sign. Its association with the Mayas of a star is further exemplified in the Mexican codices. It occurs on the wall of a temple in combination with a symbol for stars that the North Michelin, which consists in this case of skulls and crossbones. We heard of that before, right? We heard of skulls and crossbones before, right? Right. This shit comes from, we know where they got it. I'm gonna talk about that. I got some upcoming content that's gonna break all of that down, right? But they got their shit from us and they just perverted it, right? And then kind of closed us out and knocked us out the door, locked us out the door, you feel me? And just took over a lot of our ancient knowledge and used it for the wrong things, right? That's when we was talking about earlier, certain people getting certain knowledge, right? Because knowledge is power. Like if certain knowledge falls into the wrong hands, it's a bad thing for the world, right? And it's clear of how shit going today, right? We will now revert to the S-shaped sign. Its association with the images of the star is further exemplified in the Mexican codices. It occurs on the wall of a temple in combination with symbols for stars and the North Michelin, which consists in this case of skulls and crossbones. In the Dresden Codex of Maya, origin, there is an extremely important page on which the S sign occurs in connection with the twin deities besides rain and cross symbols, right? Because remember, the S sign represents Shon Kalili, right? A careful examination of the group shows that one of the seated figures is accompanied by a downpour of rain painted blue in the original, besides the S-shaped symbol, which is also repeated above the head in his companion. Higher up on the same page, the S occurs again in a group of glyphs along twin seated figures. These, as well as single-seated form beneath them, have an eye or a large black spot surmounted by dots instead of a head. Monsieur Leon de Rosny has identified this figure, which occurs in the Codex Tronoil, I'm pronouncing that wrong, as the image of the supreme divinity of the Mayas, whom are more renowned, one of whose titles was Kin Ich Owa, literally means son, our Lord. Let me read that part again, right? In the Codex of Troano, I'm assuming it's pronounced like that, Troano, Troano. All right, in the Codex Troano as the image of the supreme divinity of the Mayas, of whom more are now, one of their titles were Kin Ich Owa, which literally means son, our Lord, right? Kin means son, Ich means I, and Owa means Lord, right? A similar sign consisting of the lower half of the human body seated with a large eye on his knees is repeated several times in the Borgian Codex, right? This form is also figured as seated in a temple without the eye star, but 3 stars are the proof of the S sign is on the lower wall of the building, right? Drink some more water. What we got? The above facts demonstrate that in both MSS derive from different sources, the same association of ideas is expressed. The S sign appear in connection with twin or single-seated forms or forms surmounted by a symbol for a star, right? Can I turn my camera around? Okay. Oh, nah, I gotta tell you on my screen. Hold on, let me try to do it. Yeah, I just wanted y'all to see it, but it's showing right here, right? So it's saying that the above facts demonstrate that in both MSS derive from different sources, the same association of ideas expressed. The S sign appears in connection with the twin or single-seated forms surmounted by a symbol for a star. It is unnecessary for me to lay further stress upon obvious facts that the only celestial body which could possibly have been associated with a seated form suggesting repose was Polaris. It is moreover only by assuming that the sign of the seated star represents the stationary pole star that in its combination in the codices with the S sign shown clearly, Ursa Minor, can be understood. I likewise draw attention to the possibility of the S or single representation of the constellation may well have been employed as a sign for the summer solstice, since in some localities during the shortest night of the year, Ursa Minor may have been visible in only one position, right? We're gonna stop there. We're gonna touch on this small print right here. Now it says, though The full meaning, hold on right quick. All right, I'm back. All right. So let's touch on this small print right quick. Let me read that last sentence I just said again right quick. Um, I likewise draw attention to the possibility that the S or single representation of the constellation may well have been employed as a sign for the summer solstice, since in some localities during the shortest night of the year, Ursa Minor may have only been visible in one position only. Right. So the small print says the full meaning which may have been attached to the I symbol in both Nahuatl and Maya languages is set forth in the following notes, which I give merely for the suggestion that they convey a deep meaning have been attached to the I symbol. Remember me telling you about the I symbol because the I symbol originally came from over here, just like the swastika, just like the Confederate flag, just like a lot of other shit, right? Um, Now the Nahuatl or Nahuatl word for I is ex tilotili, but in pictography it is represented in the phonetic value of ix or she, right? Oh, my bad. It's she. Well, they got it spelled wrong, or I could say a she, I she, I she. But in pictography, it represented the phonetic value of I she only. It may therefore have been employed as a cursive sign for the face Shetili, and the fact that the figures in the center of the symbol Olin, where a face sometimes occurs, conforms this sunrise. In the Maya language, the word for I is ich. Remember, I told y'all that, right? Which possibly, which practically identical to the Nahuatl word I she, right? Yes, I she. And this enters into the composition of the following words, the meanings of which are worth considering in connection with the fact that the eyes shown have been employed to convey the meaning of a star in both languages. Remember, I told y'all that. So when y'all see that star, the evil eye, and all these other things, at its origin, it represented Polaris. It represented a star, right? A lot of people don't know that. They think it represents other things. I mean, inevitably it do, right? We put our own meanings on different things, and yeah, but at its origin is it represented star, right? Um, Having played to convey the meaning of star in both language, Ashi Manchun, eternal, without beginning, Ishmayim equals forever, continuously, without interpretation. Ish Ash Ashi Maxul equals perpetual without end. The fact that each of these Maya words exhibits the prefix Ashi and that an I is employed to express the sound and stands for a star, it is certainly interesting since it suggests that the natives associated the idea of eternity with stars, right? And with the eye as well. All right, so we're gonna do a couple more pages and we're gonna wrap it up. And tomorrow is Sunday, so I should be able to come back on and give y'all another couple hours, right? Reverting to figure 17. No. We was up there. Assuming that the Triskelion was the sign for the winter solstice. We should thus have natural signs for 2 nights marking turning points of light and darkness in the year. Reverting to figure 17, I from the Codex Dresdenus, I draw attention that it furnishes definite proof that the Mayas associated the idea of immovable seated star with twin deities, and that they connected the S symbol with cross and rain symbols. A striking combination of latter symbols is represented under the principal seated figures. It consists of diagonal cross traversed perpendicularly by a band of blue water. Further, Maya cross symbols should be cursor cursorily. That's a strange word. Examine here, figure 18, and they got a couple other 1, 2, 3, 6, 7, and 13. They will be found to consist of variations of two fundamental types, often figured alongside each other and enclosed inside of a square or circle. One type consists of two diagonally crossed bars, plain or representing crossbones. Right? Told y'all about the crossbones, right? That come from it, right? And that represented astronomy. A rectangular cross also found. The other type exhibits a small cross, square, and circle or dot in the center of the square with a circle in each corner. In some cases, they are united by a series of dots to the central circle, and thus form a diagonal cross, which is sometimes figured as contained in a flower with 4 petals, such as it is found on the Mexican symbolism. Right, so y'all paying attention to these numbers too, right? The diagonal dotted cross is frequently combined with 4 pairs of black bars placed in the middle of each side of the square, pointing towards the center. Similarly, pairs of black bars are figured in the BNMS on the mantle of Michelin Tecutili, with stars around of his symbols a spider, right? So you remember I told you the scorpion can represent Tecutili, right? Also the ocelot, right? And the spider represents Michelin Tecutili, which both of them, Tezcatlipoca, my bad, I said Tecutili. Tezcatlipoca is represented by the ocelot and by the ocelot, and what I just said, a scorpion as well, right? And then Michelin Tecutili is represented by the spider, among other things, but they're both Tezcatlipoca. Michelin Tecutili is damn near one and the same, like one of the 4 principal gods, but they both represent the below underworld, and you know what I mean, or let me say Arab culture and femininity as well, right? But similar pairs of black bars are figured in the BNMS on the mantle of Michelin Tecutili, with the stars around one of his symbols, a spider, right? It's just one of his symbols. They likewise recur on 2 of several sacrificial papers on page 69, amongst which one exhibits a diagonal cross, another the S sign, while others display realistic drawings of stars with 6 or 8 points. The pairs of bars figure in the hieroglyph designated by Maya scholarships as the sign for kin, the sun. So you remember, in Mayan language, kin means sun, right? Which may be seen in the center of large diagonal cross symbols. In figure 18 from the Dresden Codex, the cross is composed of 2 bones and two arrow points of a particularly interesting combination, considering that in the Maya, a bone is Bak, right? So in the Maya language, so y'all learning a couple words, right? So kin means son, right? I mean Diodo, well that's in the Wallo. Well, but so in the Maya language, kin means son, and Bak, B-A-K, means bone, right? Is a bone is Bak, an arrow is Kab, Kab, Cha'elil, Cha'elil, and the name given to the gods of the four quarters, the sustainers of the world, is Bakab. So it was showing you how they combine these words to make these meanings, right? It cannot be denied that the excuse me, phonetic elements of this name are, damn, I'm fucking up. It cannot be denied that the phonetic elements of this name occur in the words for bones and arrows, which form the cross symbolic of the four quarters, right? In figure 18, the cross symbol may be composed of four bones, but of this I am not certain. In both cases, however, the crosses rest on. What the fuck just happened? I don't know what just happened on my screen. Um, Just something crazy. Uh, it cannot be denied that the phonetic elements of this name occur in the words for bones and arrows, which form the cross symbolic of the four quarters. In figure 18, the cross may be composed of four bones, by of this I am not certain. In both cases, however, the crosses rest on a curious double and part party colored symbol and are associated with serpent signs in which the open jaws and teeth are prominent features. It is noteworthy while can or cam is the Maya for serpent word. Okay, is Maya for serpent. So can, C-A-N, or cam, C-A-M, is the Maya word for serpent, right? The word kamach means jaw, the figure consisting of the upper jaw only of a serpent in the left-hand corner of the band above proves therefore to be a cursive and phonetic sign for serpent, right? The party colored symbol combined with the cross symbol, with the cross obviously signifies a duality such as light and darkness, the above and the below, and a series of other dualities, possibly the two divisions of the year, the dry and rainy seasons. In Mexico, we are authorized by documentary evidence to give a wider and deeper interpretation of the symbol of duality, for it can be absolutely proven that the Mexican philosophers divided the heavens into two imaginary proportions and respectively identified these with the male and female principles, right? See, I remember me telling you about above and the below, how the masculine and the feminine come together creates divinity, right? When they're operating in harmony, right? That creates divinity, right? And you need a man and a woman to create life, anyways. So that's another gem right there. Um, Yeah, so it say in Mexico, we are authorized by documentary evidence to give a wider and deeper interpretation of the symbol of duality, for it can be absolutely proven that the Mexican philosophers divided the heavens into two imaginary portions and respectively identified these with the male and female principles. And in the West, the West was designated as Chuo it's the Nawak word, the Nawak words, these words right here. I mean, it's a language, but these words are way more difficult than the Mayan word, bro. Let me just say that. Um, Chul Talampa, the place or part of the women. So in the Nuwash, the West was designated as Chul Talampa, the place or part of the women. Hmm. The souls of the women who had earned immortality were supposed to dwell there, whilst the souls of the men resided in the east. In the appendix of the book Sawagan Historia, it is described how, according to native belief, the souls of the male warriors held the daily appearance of the sun above the eastern horizon and escorted it to Nepentila, the zenith, right? So it says, here are the souls of women who waited. And wait, let me read that part again, y'all. Yeah, so it says in the appendix book, Sawagan Historia, it is described how, according to the native belief, the souls of the male warriors held the daily appearance of the sun above the eastern horizon and escorted it to Nepentila, the zenith. Here, the souls of the women awaited it and assumed the duty of escorting the sun to the western horizon, the symbol for which was called Kali, which equals house, right? So Kali, Calli, equals house or equals the house. The above passage indicates that the native philosophers imagined across the middle of the sky a line of demarcation separating the portions of the heavens respectively allotted to the male and female souls. For 4 years after deaths, these souls retained their human bodies, and then, after passing through 9 successful heavens, enter into the celestial paradise, which they assume the forms of different kinds of butterflies and hummingbirds. And yeah. The names of these are enumerated in the Nawali text of Sawagan. The symbolism of the hummingbird has already been explained by a passage cited by Gomorrah's historian. In this connection, it is extremely interesting to find the hummingbird represented in the BNMS as sucking honey from a flower, which it is attached by a cord covered with, oh shit, I see how they did this, which is attached by a cord covered with a bird's down to a bone, the symbol of death, right? The peculiar but expressive group of symbols figures only on the headdresses of deities, wearing certain other symbols, amongst which we can find the Eka Kolkata, I'm not even gonna pronounce it, and Eka Shonquili, the image of Ursa Minor already described. The merest indication of the association of a circumpolar constellation with the idea of death, disappearance, and resurrection, reappearance, is of special interest since ancient Mexicans located the underworld, the place of the dead, in the north. Reflection showed, however, that such an association can only have suggested itself to the minds of star observers living in southern latitudes approximate to the equator, or in localities where northern horizon was more or less shut off from a view by intervening mountains. So that said a lot right there. In such places, Polaris would appear comparably close to the boundary line of the northern sky, so that the Ursa constellations in Cassiopeia would be invisible to local astronomers at midnight during the period of the year when one or the other of the star groups seemingly stretch between Polaris and the northern horizon. Right. So what I'm gonna do is, oh yeah, cause this is about to get into some other shit. Oh yeah, this next page is gonna be good. We gonna resume this tomorrow, family. Appreciate everybody that stopped in. You know what I mean? Kicked it with me for a little bit. I appreciate everybody that may be watching from the outside and listening. Appreciate you just for listening. I'm gonna end this. Hopefully they upload this so y'all can rewatch this tomorrow and catch the gems that I was speaking on. If not, I am going to resume tomorrow where we left off today. Um, the time is going to be somewhere in the afternoon. So yeah, and I get my TikTok privileges back tomorrow too. So I'm gonna be on their ass afterwards. But peace, love, and power to my people. Hope y'all learned something. We got a lot more to go. So stick around.